Good morning. We could stand for prayer. Father, just be with us today and show us your truth. Help me to say what's right. Just pray for our day, that we could walk worthy of you and be faithful to you in everything we do. Just be with us and pray for other people around the world, people, men and women that are by themselves, that are seeking you, that you would strengthen them and help them. In Jesus' name, amen. I want to talk a little bit about seeking the Lord with our whole hearts. I looked up some verses. There was a lot of verses in Deuteronomy, and I'll just read some of them. It was before the children of Israel were going into Canaan, and Moses was warning them, and he told them that when they went in there that they would fall away from God, and that when they would be in a hostile nation, that they would cry to the Lord again, and He would be merciful to them and bring them back to their land. But if we can turn to Deuteronomy 4:29, that's verse 1. Well, maybe I'll just start. I think these teachings that Moses was talking to them about apply to us now in the new covenant. Like, if we could just start in the first chapter there, just kind of has a parallel between instead of the Old Testament, now we keep the New Testament. I'll just start in verse 1, chapter 4, verse 1. So now, Israel, give heed to the statutes and ordinances that I am teaching you to observe, so that you may live to enter and occupy the land that the Lord, the God of your ancestors, is giving you. You must neither add anything to what I command you, nor take away anything from it, but keep the commandments of the Lord your God with which I am charging you. You have seen for yourself what the Lord did with regard to the Baal of Peor, how the Lord your God destroyed from among you everyone who followed the Baal of Peor, while those of you who held fast to the Lord your God are all alive today. I guess I didn't remember that everyone was killed then, but I guess the Lord destroyed the people that had went after this false god. See, just as Lord. Maybe I'll just skip down a few verses, or I'm sorry, I'll just keep on reading. See, just as the Lord my God has charged me, I now teach you statutes and ordinances for you to observe in the land you are about to enter and occupy. You must observe them diligently, for this will show your wisdom and discernment to the peoples, who, when they hear all these statutes, will say, surely this great nation is a wise and discerning people. For what other great nation has a God so near to it as the Lord our God is? Whenever we call to Him. It's a question. And what other great nation has statutes and ordinances as just as this entire law that I am setting before you today? But take care and watch yourselves closely, so as neither to forget the things that your eyes have seen, nor to let them slip from your mind all the days of your life. Make them known to your children and your children's children, how you once stood before the Lord your God Horeb, when the Lord said to me, Assemble the people for me, and I will let them hear my words, so that they may learn to fear me as long as they live on the earth, and may teach their children so. You approached and stood at the foot of the mountain, while the mountain was blazing up to the very heavens, shrouded in dark clouds. Then the Lord spoke to you out of the fire. You heard the sound of words, but saw no form. There was only a voice. He declared to you his covenant, which he charged you to observe. That is 10 commandments, and he wrote them on 2 stone tablets. I wasn't really going to read all this. You do not. But he talks about making gods of stone and making them figures of people and animals and birds. And people worshiping the sun. And although it doesn't seem like that's as common, I guess not very common in our day, I believe there's other things that we can worship. Things of this world. Just the pride of life, and just there's still many things that want our attention, even if there's not gods of stone and wood that we just set down in front of us and worship them. We still give our time to do things that aren't for the Lord. Or I mean we can. There are still those things that we can do that with. There, I wanted to read verse 29 there in the end. So it says when they do these things, they will go into exile. But if they seek the Lord with their whole heart and with their soul, the Lord will hear them. And there in verse 30 or verse 29. And when these destructions come upon them, they will call upon the Lord, and so we can always turn again if we find ourselves in the enemy's territory or in his camp. I've got another verse here in Deuteronomy 10:12. That I wanted to read. So now, Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you? Only to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to keep the commandments of the Lord your God and his decrees that I am commanding you today for your own well-being. And I was just thinking of things in our lives that want to take our attention from God. And I remember a time in my life when I remember someone spoke one time about there being one thing in our lives that we don't want to give up. And it's something dear to us. It may not be very big, it may be, but that's what God wants from us. He wants to get us to give up our whole lives to follow him. And if there's something in our lives that we still hold dearer than God, and we aren't willing to give that thing up, then that can stand between us and God. I was just thinking of that all through the Bible, and in the New Testament, God or Jesus talked about the greatest commandments of loving the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all your soul and with all of your strength, I think. Mind and strength, maybe. And to love your neighbors yourself. If we do those things, it's pleasing to the Lord. I also wanted to read, a while back, I hadn't read it before, but a while back I had read in the fourth book of Maccabees, it's chapter 5. There was this old man. I guess he was a kind of a philosopher and of the Jewish law. I'm not sure, but that's what it says. But it was just very encouraging to me. So I just want to read that. I don't know who all has a book with the Maccabees in there, but it's 4 Maccabees, chapter 5. I'll just start maybe 5 and 6. It's kind of a long chapter, but I guess I'll just read all of it. The tyrant Antiochus, sitting in state with his counselors on a certain high place, and with his armed soldiers standing around him, ordered the guards to seize each and every Hebrew, and to compel them to eat pork and food sacrificed to idols. If any were not willing to eat defiling foods, they were to be broken on the wheel and killed. When many persons had been rounded up, one man, Eleazar, by name, leader of the flock, was brought before the king. He was a man of priestly family, learned in the law, advanced in age, and known to many in the tyrant's court because of his philosophy. When Antiochus saw him, he said, "Before I begin to torture you, old man, I would advise you to save yourself by eating pork. For I respect your age and your gray hairs. Although you have had them for so long a time, it does not seem to me that you are a philosopher when you observe the religion of the Jews." Now I just kind of compared that with what on further down, with the way Eleazar talks to the king about his laws and the God he serves. I just kind of drew the parallel between me, like that's how we can, like, the world wants us just to do these things. They say, what's wrong with him? Like, they won't defile you, but Jesus gave us commands, and we just obey those commands because he gave them to us. And I just kind of wanted to point that out before I read on further. When nature has granted it to us, why should you abhor eating the very excellent meat of this animal? It is senseless not to enjoy delicious things that are not shameful, and wrong to spurn the gifts of nature. It seems to me that you will do nothing even more senseless if by holding a vain opinion concerning the truth you continue to despise me to your own hurt. The king was talking about himself. Will you not awaken from your foolish philosophy, dispel your futile reasonings, adopt a mind appropriate to your years, philosophize according to the truth of what is beneficial, and have compassion on your old age by honoring my humane advice? For consider this, if there is some power watching over this religion of yours, it will excuse you from any transgression that arises out of compulsion. When the tyrant urged him in this fashion to eat meat unlawfully, Eleazar asked to have a word. When he had received permission to speak, he began to address the people as follows. We, O Antiochus, who have been persuaded to govern our lives by the divine law, think that there is no compulsion more powerful than our obedience to the law. Therefore, we consider that we should not transgress it in any respect. Even if, as you suppose, our law were not truly divine, and we had wrongly held it to be divine, not even so would it be right for us to invalidate our reputation for piety. Therefore, do not suppose that it would be a petty sin if we were to eat defiling food. To transgress the law in matters either small or great is of equal seriousness. For in either case, the law is equally despised. You scoff at our philosophy, as though living by it were irrational. But it teaches us self-control, so that we master all pleasures and desires, and it also trains us in courage, so that we endure any sufferings willingly. It instructs us in justice, so that in all our dealings we act impartially, and it teaches us piety, so that with proper reverence we worship the only living God. Therefore we do not eat defiling food, for since we believe that the law was established by God, we know that in the nature of things the Creator of the world, in giving us the law, has shown sympathy towards us. He has permitted us to eat what will be most suitable for our lives, but He has forbidden us to eat meats that would be contrary to this. It would be tyrannical for you to compel us not only to transgress the law, but also to eat in such a way that you may deride us for eating defiling foods, which are most hateful to us. But you shall have no such occasion to laugh at me, nor will I transgress the sacred oaths of my ancestors concerning the keeping of the law. Not even if you gouge out my eyes and burn my entrails. I am not so old and cowardly as not to be young in reason on behalf of piety. Therefore get your torture wheels ready and fan the fire more vehemently. I do not so pity my old age as to break the ancestral laws by my own act. I will not play false to you, O law that trained me, nor will I renounce you, beloved self-control. I will not put you to shame, philosophical reason, nor will I reject you, honored priesthood, and knowledge of the law. You, O king, shall not defile the honorable mouth of my old age, nor my long life lived lawfully. My ancestors will receive me as pure as one who does not fear your violence, even to death. You may tyrannize the ungodly, but you shall not dominate my religious principles, either by word or through deed. And I guess it goes to the next chapter there. I'll just keep reading. When Eleazar in this manner had made eloquent response to the exhortation of the tyrant, the guards who were standing by dragged him violently to the instruments of torture. First they stripped the old man, though he remained adored with the gracefulness of his piety. After they had tied his arms on each side, they flogged him, while a herald who faced him cried out, "Obey the king's commands." But the courageous and noble man, like a true Eleazar, was unmoved, as though being tortured in a dream. Yet while the old man's eyes were raised to heaven, his flesh was being torn by scourges, his blood flowing, and his sides were being cut to pieces. Although he fell to the ground because his body could not endure the agonies, he kept his reason upright and unswerving. One of the cruel guards rushed at him and began to kick him in the side to make him get up again after he fell. But he bore the pains and scorned the punishment and endured the tortures. Like a noble athlete, the old man, while being beaten, was victorious over his torturers. In fact, with his face bathed in sweat and gasping heavily for breath, he amazed even his torturers by his courageous spirit. At that point, partly out of pity for his old age, partly out of sympathy from their acquaintances with him, partly out of admiration for his endurance, some of the king's retinue came to him and said, Eleazar, why are you so irrationally destroying yourself through these evil things? We will set before you some cooked meats. Save yourself by pretending to eat pork. So now they were trying to just get him to act like he wouldn't actually have to defile himself, but he would pretend like he was. But he wasn't going to do that either. But Eleazar, as though more bitterly tormented by this counsel, cried out, Never may we, the children of Abraham, think so basely that out of cowardice we feign a role unbecoming to us, for it would be irrational. If having lived in accordance with truth up to old age, and having maintained in accordance with the law the reputation of such a life, we should now change our course and ourselves become a pattern of impiety to the young by setting them an example in the eating of defiling food. It would be shameful if we should survive for a little while and during that time be a laughingstock to all of our cowardice, and be despised by the tyrant as unmanly, by not contending even to death for our divine law. Therefore, O children of Abraham, die nobly for your religion. And you guards of the tyrant, why do you delay? When they saw that he was so courageous in the face of the affliction, and that he had not been changed by their compassion, the guards brought him to the fire, where they burned him with maliciously contrived instruments, threw him down, and poured sinking liquids into his nostrils. When he was now burned to his very bones and about to expire, he lifted up his eyes to God and said, You know, O God, that though I might have saved myself, I am dying in burning torments for the sake of the law. Be merciful to your people, and let your punishment suffice for them. Make my blood their purification, and take my life in exchange for theirs. So this man died, and for the sake of the law of God, or the law of Moses, and I just hope that we can be that courageous in living for the law of Christ, that we would not give in to the world or give in to the things that they have to offer, and would live nobly like he did to the end. So that's all I had. If anyone had any comments or corrections.